is Resilience. I'm John Biggs. Today we have Matthew Hodgson. He's the CEO and CTO of Element, and he's also the project lead of a open source project called Matrix. Welcome, Matthew.
No, thanks for having me on.
So you're doing work in secure sovereign communications, which suggests to me that it's basically locked down. It's unavailable to outsiders, and it's exactly what I think a lot of people need right now when it comes to, wartime, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So our context is basically giving people the ability to run their own encrypted communication systems entirely on their own terms with full digital sovereignty. Our full experiment is, are you able to communicate if you are the only country in the world? And if the answer is no, that means that you do not have resilience, you do not have digital sovereignty. So that's basically the lens that we look through. And the way we provide this is by building on Matrix, which is this open source project that I started many years ago now, that effectively provides the building blocks to create a Signal or WhatsApp or even Teams or Zoom style communication system, but entirely open source, built on an open standard so that you can run it yourself on your own network, perhaps in an air-gapped environment, perhaps in a public federation. It's really up to you, but it gives you entire control over how you communicate.
And Matrix is, what kind of encryption do you use on Matrix, or how does that work?
So we use the Signal double ratchet today. In fact, we specified the Signal protocol before Signal did, back in about 2015. And did our own implementation of it that was permissively licensed called Olm. And then as the years have gone by, Signal have obviously improved theirs, and we've gone and ported aspects of that into Matrix's encryption. These days, we also use MLS, which is the IETF standard for messaging layer security. And there's a lot of work happening in Matrix to figure out how to get best of both worlds between the kind of classic gold standard Signal style encryption and this more recent emerging MLS-based encryption.
So you have an open source product which is basically available to everyone, and then you essentially commercialize the Element product. What is the overlap there? How do you negotiate that?
So you have Matrix as a non-profit foundation that publishes the core protocol and some of the key building blocks, like the encryption, for instance. And that is nowadays completely independent from Element, which is the for-profit startup, which we incorporated in 2017 in order to provide commercial Matrix deployments. And there are a lot of people now providing commercial Matrix deployments beyond Element. So Palantir's chat product is based on Matrix, for instance. So is Thales is one. And there are hundreds of vendors now in the Matrix industry that have emerged. You can kind of think of Matrix as being like the missing communication layer for the web. And just like the web has all the different browsers and servers and random web app vendors out there, Matrix obviously isn't quite as big, but it's getting there. But also similar to Blue Sky and AT Proto, for instance. So on the Element side, the product that we provide is called Element Server Suite. And this is originally built for the DoD as a way of running Matrix servers in a high-side, secure environment, and having gone through the pain of figuring out how to deploy and stig an ATO Matrix in that kind of very sensitive environment, we turn that into the main product that Element sells, so that if you are a government or public sector entity of any kind, then this is the absolute gold standard for going and running a Matrix server at scale in production with high availability, horizontal scalability, professional support from the guys who built it in the first place, and all that good stuff.
And the DoD was okay with you taking it out and basically selling it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't built specifically for them. It's just that they were, I guess, the first customer that we had for that product, and we built it as a product off our own bat. They didn't pay us for it. We went and financed the build of it, but then used them as the guinea pig to figure out how you could put it into that environment. And then I think the Germans came on. No, actually, Germany predated the DoD's involvement, as did France. But then, for instance, when NATO came on board as an Element customer, a little while later, we used precisely the same environment that we'd built for the DoD for NATO. and then across all the various other countries that we work with these days. I think we're up to about 35 countries who are using us in different capacities for their sovereign communication.
So that's a really interesting move. So you basically did the original version, I guess the commercialized version, for free, right? Just said, here, does anyone want to try this? Is that what happened, or how did that work out?
It wasn't for free, in that
Okay.
we provide it as a paid product, but the actual product build of it, we financed ourselves. Element is VC funded.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Investor cash to go and build out how you would actually build the enterprise wrap. And the rule of thumb is that if a feature goes and benefits the end user over the enterprise, then it's open source. But if it benefits the enterprise almost at the expense of the end user, so for instance, I know if it lets the enterprise remote wipe someone's client, as an end user, you don't want that at all. But as an enterprise, it's pretty important to be able to remote detonate people's accounts and that sort of thing. Then it goes on the enterprise side. And to answer your question of how we get that balance between what do we give out as open source versus what Element keeps as paid, that is the kind of the bottom line. So things like enterprise synchronized group access control. So synchronizing the lifetime of your users to their LDAP account on your system and offboarding people immediately when they leave a project, or locking down group access control to make sure there's no signal gate style disasters where randoms get accidentally invited into something that should be locked to a given access control group. That's all on the enterprise side. But anything to do with encryption or actual communication or the sort of basic building blocks, that is all open source.
How do you sell into the enterprise, especially when it comes to government, right? What's the tactic there?
I guess we have a slight unfair advantage that we are the only people providing interoperable secure comms. So if you were a government wanting to run your own heterogeneous encrypted communication network, to my knowledge, there is nobody else doing this. So starting about 10 years ago when France first came to us, that was when Macron had just come to power, so I guess 8 years ago now. And he'd been using Telegram, which is awful from the perspective of being unencrypted, run out of Russia one way or another, and you should definitely not be using it for your organizing your party and then your state, particularly in the position of power that he was. Luckily, his Ministry of Digital, DNUM, went on a mission to say, look, how do we run our own sovereign communication capability? And they've looked it up on Google and came to Matrix, and then reached out to us, terrified one of our developers by hitting them up, I think via GitHub, that well-known sort of sales channel, and said, look, can we deploy this for the whole state? And at that point, we were in beta, and we said, well, guys, this is beta, but they effectively funded us to get out of beta and deployed it out across 17 ministries now and about 600,000 daily active users. So if we were in France right now, and if we worked for the government, the chances are very high that we would have used chat, which is how they branded it, to communicate. That's on it. To answer your question, what's our go-to-market for public sector? It's really the network effects and also being the open standard. That means that the governments get proper sovereignty. They're not vendor locked to Element. And if they want to take it in-house, or if they want to use a different vendor, there are other people out there. And I think the only alternative might be Jabber and XMPP, which hasn't necessarily kept up with the times. End-to-end encryption is still fairly rare there, for instance, whereas on Matrix, as I said earlier, we're using signal-style encryption out of the box by default everywhere. And the experience you get with Element feels a lot like Teams or WhatsApp or Zoom, rather than the ICQ, MSN vibes of some of the earlier systems.
Well, that's wild, actually, that you're the number one. I mean, feels like some of the governments might want to have rolled their own, but I suppose rolling your own involves using Matrix because it's already there. Yeah.
So I've got a great example of that yesterday, in fact, was it the day before Wednesday, I think, in Belgium, announced a national communication app called Beam. And in practice, it is Element. And our entire stack, admittedly, they're using the open source tier at the moment, so they don't have any of the enterprise stuff. Working with them to hopefully encourage them to use the paid product and therefore support the upstream. But from their perspective, it's entirely digitally sovereign communication that they've rolled out themselves out of Belgium. So they get to check both boxes of having the warm, fuzzy feeling of branding it and owning it and controlling it and doing it in-house, whilst also benefiting from the wider ecosystem and being able to talk to the guys in Luxembourg who have LuxChat, which is, again, a national matrix deployment, or the Netherlands who have their one, or France, obviously, next door. I think literally all of their neighbour countries are now natively matrix first, and they were the only one left. So they basically get best of both worlds.
Fascinating. What do you think about so I mean, it feels like Ukraine, for example, the soldiers, I mean, the Russians as well, they're using Telegram, they're potentially using Signal. Is there a way for them to start using Matrix, or is there a way for them to start using Element just from a single user level, as opposed to a countrywide sovereign level?
So I believe that Ukraine has the world's biggest Matrix 2.0 deployment there is right now. I can't really go into details on it for obvious reasons, but frankly, that surprised me. We support them pro bono because they're really pushing the bleeding edge of using the very latest stuff. Like 2.0 is not finalized yet. The official Matrix spec is on 1.17 right now. So they are really ahead of the curve to try to get the very, very best advantage there. And it's interesting that they very heavily use the interoperability side of things. And I haven't really spelt out, but Matrix is like the web. It's like email. It's completely decentralized, and you can decentralize it at any granularity that you like. So that could be per country or per ministry, but it could also be per town. It could be per unit. It could be per person. It could be per device. So we do have variants of Matrix which run the whole stack on your phone. So you have a mesh network, a bit like BitChat or FireChat, those sort of kind of mesh messengers, if you want to go that far. So for Ukraine, I know they have many different deployments at different granularities, including at a citizen level. And you can use it to bridge between the citizen deployments. And I know there's an outfit called DComms, Decentralized Comms, I think it's dcoms.net.ua from memory, who are doing civilian deployments in, I think, 15 different towns and cities around Ukraine, as well as some of the more sensitive ones. And I assume that there is interop of some kind between them.
So in terms of the spec, there's no central server, there's no name server, there's no routing system. It's basically my phone is next to your phone and I'm going to find my way to you somehow.
Yeah, so to be clear, the peer-to-peer stuff is pretty alpha, and it's recently been picked up by the Dutch government in the last 6 months. And we had a few years where it wasn't being funded, but since November, we've been working on it with the Dutch quite successfully. It uses Bluetooth Low Energy by default. So as you say, you don't even need to pair the devices. They just need to be within a couple of meters of one another. And then you automatically form a mesh. For normal Matrix, it feels more like email in that you use DNS to discover the other people. But again, there is no central server whatsoever. Just like in email, if some random email server goes down somewhere, it's only going to impact the people who are connected to it.
But somebody in nearby is broadcasting the addresses of everyone locally, right? It's not something like that. Yeah.
So for the peer-to-peer stuff, we use currently an overlay network called Pinecone that we wrote that is somewhat similar to, and this is pretty nerdy stuff, I'm afraid, but there's a network overlay called Yggdrasil, named after the Norse and what we did was to take Yggdrasil and do an iteration of it specifically for Matrix, which goes and assigns public keys to everybody on that network and then figures out in real time a kind of spanning tree protocol, which looks like a big tree, hence the name Yggdrasil, of all the people nearby. So it's not like you are leaking email addresses or user IDs. It's more a big cloud of
public IDs. Okay, fascinating. All right. So you're saying that the for all intents and purposes, Ukraine isn't using Telegram, but
I think they're using all sorts. I'm sure they've got some Telegram. I'm sure they've got some Viber. I'm sure they've got some WhatsApp, and I know that there is a lot of Matrix flying around as well.
Is there any benefit to what's going to be the tendency towards this? Is there going to be more sovereign networks like this? Can the governments use just the standard? I guess today it's plain old telephone system, right? Can they use the POTS that and the lines that are still running right now? Even in terms of mobile, or do you think eventually every country is going to have its own network service?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, our background before Matrix was doing SIP and VoIP in the telecoms industry and doing lots of sort of layer 5 soft switches and doing MVNOs and stuff like that. And Matrix was very much the result of 15 years of building out SIP and XMPP things, thinking, why is there not a encrypted, decentralized, open alternative to POTS, to the PSTN? Why doesn't the net have a communication there? So Matrix tries to be that communication there, and we are seeing more and more uptake of it in public sector, particularly. Relatively little in private sector, but once the United Nations started using us, and the European Commission and NATO and these kind of aggregate bodies, as well as the individual countries, it really does feel like it has critical mass. But as I said at the beginning, I guess before we were on air, the point... We tend to operate at the application layer of the actual app looking and feeling like WhatsApp or Signal or whatever, and then the infrastructure below it. But for the physical layer of, is that going over 5G or Bluetooth or LoRa or whatever your favorite thing is, we tried to abstract it away as much as possible. Things like that plug-in overlay network really doesn't care what the underlying thing is. So to answer your question, I think that we will continue to see POTS out there, and I'm sure there will continue to be femtocell, MVNOs, and also with 6G, even more interesting granularity of cell towers. But we also see more and more people looking to run Matrix at the edge, sometimes on the cell tower. And rather than putting GSM and VoIP and VoLTE and all the old SIP-based stuff over the IP to do the voice calling or whatever it is, they just talk Matrix. And we do have one really interesting country that we can't talk about who has gone the whole hog and has built custom sovereign radios, but then put Matrix directly over that. And it is such a joy to have the modern experiences of like synchronized conversation history and read receipts and threads and multi-way video calling that looks like Teams rather than an old school sort of mosaic video conference. And it works really quite nicely. So I'm not sure that we're going to be displacing the entirety of 3GPP and the GSM anytime soon, but at least for these disaster recovery, resilience, military, also federated mission networking, so multi-partner environment, communication and collaboration between coalition forces. I'm expecting to see a lot more Matrix there. And then perhaps it will leak into more of the mainstream. But for now, we're really focusing on that public sector use case because that's where we've seen the traction.
All right. Well, thank you, Matthew. This has been a really good. I used to do telecom switch programming back in the 90s, so I haven't gotten to talk about SIP or anything else for a long time. So I appreciate it.
Well, you at least realize our pain from all those years building SIP switch that we wanted. There must be a better way to do this in a kind of modern 21st century way, and that's what Matrix is.
I gave everybody in Poland call waiting. That's my claim to fame. So anybody who has call waiting now in Poland can thank me. I was sitting in a fishbowl, giving people call waiting. All right. Well, Matthew from Element, element.io, is that the site? All right, perfect. So we'll send folks over there. Thank you for joining us on Resilience.
Brilliant. Thanks, John.
Thank you.